I woke up in a book. One of those cheesy web novels, to be exact. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I was standing in the middle of a scene I'd just been rage reading. The one where the spineless main character tries to trick his rich wife into signing divorce papers. In the story, he pulls a fast one, gets her signature on a document with a hidden alimony clause, and then has to wait through a 1-month grace period before he can officially leave. During that month, the wife's golden boy, X, makes his life a living hell, framing him for everything under the sun. And what does the original guy do? He takes it. He has a mouth, but never speaks up, hands, but never fights back, feet, but never walks away. All he does is mope around with a pained look on his face, a total doormat with a martyr complex. A complete simp. But I'm not him. My name is Ethan Vance. A second ago, I was at my laptop, roasting a trashy web novel called The CEO's Secret Guardian. The next, I'm him, the loser husband who gets abused from chapter 1 until he's finally hit by a car. Also named Ethan Vance. A crisp divorce agreement is in my hand. The air in the study smells of expensive sandalwood. And sitting across the desk from me is a woman so cold she could have been carved from ice. Chloe Price, my wife, CEO of Price Industries, the most beautiful and powerful woman in Sterling City, and the heroine of this whole mess. She's looking down at a file, her long eyelashes casting shadows on her cheeks. Her profile is flawless, a work of art, but her expression is pure, glacial indifference. She has no idea that the papers in my hand have been tampered with by the idiot whose body I'm now occupying. He hid a key clause in the asset division section, written in a font so small you'd need a microscope to read it. If Chloe signs it without looking closely, he walks away with a hefty chunk of her fortune. According to the plot, the original Ethan's pathetic trick works. He gets the money, blows it all, and then gets swindled by the book's main villain, Blake Sterling, Chloe's one that got away. He ends up broke and drowning in debt. Stupid doesn't even begin to cover it. Had enough of a look? Chloe finally lifts her head. Her stunning eyes are completely devoid of warmth. You've been staring at that agreement all night. Is there a problem? She thinks I'm hesitating, trying to squeeze a few more dollars out of the settlement. In her eyes, I'm nothing but a parasite, forced on her family because of some old promise between our grandfathers. I have no ambition, no dignity. My only job is to be an obedient, useless husband. I look at her and smile. Chloe's brow furrows slightly. She's probably never seen me smile like this. The old Ethan was always a kicked puppy in her presence, desperate for approval, but too scared to ask for it. No problem, I say. My voice is calm as if I were discussing the weather. It's well written, clear, concise. What else would I expect from the great Chloe Price? A flash of derision crosses her face. She clearly thinks I'm just trying another angle of pathetic flattery. She slides a sleek Mont Blanc fountain pen across the polished desk. Then sign it. The gesture is sharp, efficient, like she's closing a minor business deal. I pick up the pen but don't uncap it. Instead, I set it aside and pick up the divorce agreement. As Chloe watches, confused, I grip one corner of the papers. Ryup, the sharp sound of tearing paper slices through the quiet study. I don't stop. I tear the 2 halves into 4 and the 4 into 8 until the document that held all of the original Ethan's stupid hopes is nothing but a pile of confetti in my hands. Chloe is completely stunned. For the first time, a crack appears in her icy facade. She probably ran through 1,000 possible scenarios in her head. Me begging, crying, bargaining, but this was definitely not one of them. I casually toss the scraps into the wastebasket next to the desk, like I'm throwing away a used napkin. What? What are you doing? Her voice is a slight tremor, a mix of anger and disbelief. Nothing, I say, leaning back in the leather chair, completely relaxed. I look her straight in the eye. I just feel that this agreement isn't worthy of us. She thinks I've lost my mind. Ethan, what kind of game are you playing now? Her expression turns sharp and cold again. Cut the theatrics. I don't have time for this. I'll have my lawyer draft a new one tomorrow. You will sign it. Not so fast, Ms. Price. I cross one leg over the other, a move the old Ethan would never have dared to make. Oh, we're getting a divorce. I want it even more than you do. That stops her cold. But not right now. I hold up one finger. 1 month. Give me 1 month. You want to drag this out for another month? She scoffs, the disdain returning to her eyes. What? trying to squeeze one last payday out of this. No, I say, shaking my head. I speak each word slowly and clearly. This month is a grace period, a gift from me to you. For this month, I'll continue to live here, but we'll stay out of each other's way. After 1 month, I'll sign an agreement walking away with nothing. Not a single penny. Chloe doesn't believe me. It's absurd. A gold-digging waste of space voluntarily giving up a potential fortune? What's the catch? She's smart. She cuts right to the chase. The catch is this, I say, leaning forward slightly, my eyes locked on hers. A playful smile touches my lips, one she can't decipher. After 1 month, the decision to sign is mine, and I'm willing to bet that by then, you'll be the one begging me not to. The study falls into a dead silence. Chloe stares at me like I'm a lunatic. For the first time, her perceptive eyes can't read a thing from my face. She doesn't know that this useless husband of hers has been replaced. I'm not the spineless pushover she can walk all over. I'm a guy who's read the entire script. She thinks I'm bluffing, but what I'm giving her is a prophecy. Phoenix. After a long moment, she spits the word out, her eyes cold enough to freeze hell over. I'd love to see how you make a fool of yourself in a month. She stands, turns on her heel, and walks out of the study without a backward glance, her posture proud and defiant. I lean back in a chair and let out a long breath. All right, let the games begin. Blake Sterling and all you other condescending pricks. You ready? Because your story? From now on, I'm the one writing it. The next morning, while I was still getting used to this body, my mother-in-law, Susan Price, stormed the villa. She never shows up unless she wants something, and she usually can't even be bothered to look at me. Her showing up this early could only mean one thing. I was in the kitchen making myself some eggs, wearing the old Ethan's faded gray sweatpants. The guy was basically invisible in this house, forced to even scrounge for his own breakfast. Ethan, get your ass out here. A shrill voice echoed from the living room, followed by the frantic clicking of heels on the marble floor. I calmly slid my fried eggs onto a plate and sauntered out of the kitchen. In the living room, Susan stood dressed in a Chanel power suit, her face a mask of perfectly applied makeup in pure rage. Chloe was next to her, looking annoyed, clearly dragged here against her will. The sight of me looking so relaxed only fueled Susan's fire. You have a nerve to be eating breakfast? I'm asking you, did you or did you not tear up the divorce papers Chloe gave you yesterday? She pointed a finger right at my face, nearly spraying me with spittle. I did, I said, nodding. I forked a piece of egg into my mouth and mumbled, tore him right up. You worthless piece of trash. What right do you have? Who do you think you are? Susan was trembling with fury. The Price family has fed and clothed you for 3 years, and now that we're kicking you out, you refuse to leave? I swallowed my food, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and finally met her gaze. Susan, you got it all wrong, I said with a small smile. First, I'm not refusing to leave. I told Chloe I'll walk away in a month with nothing. Second, for the past 3 years, while I may not have been bringing in the big bucks, I did all the cooking, cleaning, laundry, and landscaping. A live-in butler would cost you, what, 10 grand a month? I was a bargain. So how exactly was I getting a free ride? My little speech left Susan speechless. The old Ethan would have just stood there, head down, taking the abuse. He wouldn't have dreamed of talking back. Even Chloe shot me a surprised look. You dare talk back to me? Susan recovered, her voice getting even shriller. You think doing a few chores means anything? The Price family needs your manual labor? Let me tell you, Ethan, don't think you can get away with this. You're getting out of this house today. And why should I? I put my plate down and looked her straight in the eye. All traces of the old cowardice gone. This house may be in Chloe's name, but we are legally married, which makes this our marital residence. Until we are divorced, I have every right to live here. And with all due respect, Susan, I don't think you have the authority to kick me out of my own home. My argument was logical, well-reasoned, and definitely not something a useless bum was supposed to be able to come up with. Susan's face turned purple with rage. She just pointed at me, sputtering, unable to form a coherent sentence. That's enough, Mom. Chloe finally spoke, her voice laced with exhaustion. She rubbed her temples. Let him stay for the month. I already agreed to it. Chloe, are you out of your mind? Susan shrieked. Why are you keeping this loser around? He's just trying to stall for more money. Listen to me. Get rid of him now, Blake is. She caught herself mid-sentence, realizing her slip, and quickly shut her mouth. But I heard it. A cold smirk formed in my mind, just like in a book. My dear mother-in-law had long since written me off and was fully committed to setting her daughter up with the golden boy, Blake Sterling. Blake came from a good family, an Ivy League grad. In her eyes, he was the only one worthy of Chloe. "Mom, are you talking about Blake Sterling?" I asked, pretending to have a sudden realization. I put on a cheerful smile. "I know you've always thought he was better than me, that he'd make a better son-in-law." Susan's face went from white to green. I ignored her and continued. "But you should really think this through. Blake might look polished on the outside, but he's a snake. He's not interested in Chloe. He's interested in Price Industries. You treat him like a treasure now, but you're inviting a wolf into your house. He could end up taking everything." I said it in a half-joking tone, but the words landed like a bombshell. "What kind of garbage are you spouting now?" Susan screeched like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "You useless bum. You have a nerve to slander Blake? Do you know who he is? And what are you? You're not even worthy of polishing his shoes." "Time will tell if I'm lying or not," I said with a shrug, refusing to argue further. I knew nothing I said now would convince her. In her world, I was a lost cause, and Blake was the golden ticket. You can't change that kind of deep-seated prejudice with a few words. You have to shatter it with cold, hard facts. "Chloe, look at him. Just look at this pathetic display." Susan turned to her daughter, her voice full of anguish. "I hit a nerve, and now he's just lashing out, making things up. You can't go soft on him." Chloe's gaze fell on me, her expression unreadable. She was silent for a moment before saying to her mother, "Mom, I have a meeting at the office. I have to go. This business with him will be settled in a month." With that, she grabbed her purse from the sofa and walked out the door without a second glance in my direction. Seeing her daughter leave, Susan knew she wasn't going to win this one. She shot me one last venomous glare, spat, "Just you wait," and hurried out after Chloe. The living room was suddenly quiet. I picked up the remaining half of my eggs and popped it into my mouth. Not bad. The show was just getting started. My mother-in-law was just the appetizer. The main course was that self-righteous hypocrite, Blake Sterling. I pulled out my phone and checked the calendar. If I remember correctly, this afternoon, Blake would show up at Chloe's office, pretending to help her by offering her a poison business contract. And I was about to prepare a little gift for him in return. That afternoon, following the script in my head, I made my way to the building that housed Price Industries. The skyscraper was a testament to the family's wealth, dominating the skyline in the most expensive part of downtown. I didn't go in. I found a Starbucks across the street and grabbed a table by the window. For the last 3 years, the old Ethan had never set foot in the building, let alone this neighborhood. Chloe thought his presence was an embarrassment. I ordered the cheapest Americano on the menu and kept my eyes glued to the entrance of Price Industries. Sure enough, before long, a flashy white Maserati pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and a man in a ridiculously expensive tailored suit stepped out, his hair perfectly coiffed. He was holding a massive bouquet of red roses. Blake Sterling. He was handsome, I'll give him that. He had that polished, charming air of a successful executive, the kind of smile that could fool anyone. No wonder my mother-in-law and half the female characters in the book were obsessed with him. Too bad I knew what a rotten soul was hiding under that designer suit. He walked into the building with his flowers, and the receptionist's eyes lit up as she eagerly pointed him in the right direction. I took a sip of my coffee, calmly pulled out my phone, and dialed Chloe's number. It rang for a while before she picked up, her voice as cold and impatient as ever. "What is it?" "Busy day at the office, Ms. Price." I asked cheerfully. "If you have something to say, say it." "Oh, it's nothing major. Just a heads up. Your knight in shining armor, the one and only Blake Sterling, should be arriving at your office door any second now." Silence on the other end. I could picture her frowning, wondering how on earth I knew that. "What does this visit have to do with you?" Her voice was even colder now. "It has nothing to do with me," I said slowly. "But the gift he's bringing you has everything to do with you. Let me guess, he's presenting you with a partnership proposal for the Southbridge waterfront development, right?" I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Bullseye. The Southbridge project was Price Industries' top priority, but it had been plagued with problems. Chloe was at her wit's end. In the book, this is when Blake swoops in like a savior, offering a seemingly perfect solution. Under immense pressure, Chloe signs the deal without proper vetting. But hidden in the fine print was a killer clause. If the project failed to turn a profit within a specified time frame, Price Industries would be forced to transfer 50% of the land rights to Blake's company for a fraction of its market value. And Blake, of course, had already bribed the right people to ensure the project would never be profitable on time. With that one move, he carved a huge chunk out of the Price family fortune without breaking a sweat. How do you know this? Chloe's voice was laced with suspicion and alarm. Just a lucky guess, I replied casually. Look, Chloe, I may be a loser, but I'm not an idiot. Blake never shows up, but suddenly, when you're in a tough spot, here he is. You might see a helping hand, but I see a vulture circling. If you don't believe me, check page 17, article 3 of the supplementary notes. I bet you'll find the text is 2 font sizes smaller than the rest. I even remembered the exact location of the clause. The ultimate perk of being a dimension hopper, an open book test. Blake thought his plan was flawless, but to me, it was like reading off a cheat sheet. Another long silence. I could actually hear the faint rustle of papers. After about a minute, Chloe spoke again. This time, her voice was tinged with an undeniable shock and a hint of fear. How did you know? She asked again, her tone completely changed. Like I said, a guess, I replied, not wanting to reveal my secret. I had to keep up the act. Chloe, stop thinking everyone else is a fool. Some people wear their bad intentions on their sleeve. Anyway, I won't interrupt your little reunion. Just a friendly reminder, don't bet the future of your company on a man who wants to devour it whole. I hung up. Lifting my coffee, I glanced across the street toward a specific window high up on the skyscraper. I could almost see it. Chloe holding that contract, her face pale, and Blake across from her, his charming smile frozen on his face. Round 1. All I had to do was make one phone call, and Blake's meticulously planned ambush turned into a joke. More importantly, I had planted a seed of doubt in Chloe's mind, a seed that was about to sprout. A few minutes later, I saw Blake storm out of the building, his face a thundercloud. He furiously threw the beautiful bouquet of roses into a trash can by the entrance. He got into his Maserati, slammed on the gas, and peeled out with a roar of the engine. I smiled. Losing his cool already? The real fun hasn't even started. I finished the last of my coffee and stood up to leave. Time to head home. I had to get ready for the next act. Because if I remember correctly, in 3 days, it's the annual Price Family Gala. And that's the real stage I prepared for Blake. A stage where he'll face a public humiliation so complete, he'll never recover. 3 days flew by. The villa was unusually quiet. Chloe was out early and back late. We barely saw each other. Susan didn't come back to cause trouble, and Blake seemed to have vanished. But I knew it was the calm before the storm. They were all gearing up for a big move, planning to finish me off at tonight's family gala. That evening, I was in my room playing a game on my phone when Chloe knocked and came in. She was wearing a stunning black evening gown that showed off her elegant neck and collarbones. Her hair was up, and her makeup was subtle but perfect. She looked like a thorny rose blooming in the night. So beautiful, it was hard to look away. Get dressed. You're coming with me to the gala, she said, tossing a garment bag onto my bed. I opened it. A decent, if uninspired, suit. It seemed that even though she couldn't stand me, she cared enough about the Price family's image not to let me show up looking like a slob. Do I have to go? I asked lazily. I'm not really interested in meeting your extended family. Yes, she said, her tone absolute. Grandfather specifically asked for you to be there. Old man Price. The book didn't say much about him, only that he was the true patriarch of the family and the one who had arranged our marriage in the first place. He was traditional and cared deeply about the family's reputation. Blake and Susan were planning to use that to utterly destroy my reputation in front of the old man. Fine, I sighed, turning off my game. Let's go see the show. The car ride to the gala was silent. Chloe focused on driving, her eyes fixed on the road. I could feel her curiosity about my recent behavior, but her pride wouldn't let her ask. She had no idea that the man sitting next to her could see the entire tapestry of her family's fate, clear as day. The gala was held at the old Price family estate, a sprawling, classic mansion that looked like something out of a movie. When we arrived, the place was already packed with guests, glasses clinking, a sea of glittering high society. The moment I walked in behind Chloe, I felt hundreds of eyes on me, scornful, amused, eager for drama. My reputation as the useless husband was a running joke in their circles. Susan immediately rushed over, linking her arm with Chloe's affectionately while completely ignoring me. Standing beside her, grinning, was Blake. They honestly looked more like a proud mother and her accomplished son. "Chloe, you're finally here. Your grandfather was just asking about you," Susan said brightly, then glanced meaningfully at Blake. "Blake is here too. He brought a special gift for your grandfather." Blake smoothly presented an elegant gift box. "You're too kind, Susan," he said with perfect poise. "It's just a small token of my esteem." He then looked at me, a flicker of challenge and triumph in his eyes. He thought he had already won. I ignored him, found a quiet corner, and helped myself to a plate of appetizers. Amid all this fake politeness, food was the only thing that was real. Halfway through the party, the main event finally began. Susan walked to the center of the grand ballroom, cleared her throat, and captured everyone's attention. "My dear friends and family, tonight is not just a celebration. I'd like you all to bear witness to something important." She paused, her eyes sweeping over to me, filled with venom. "It seems we have a thief in the Price family." The room erupted in whispers. Every single guest turned to stare at me. I was still calmly eating a slice of tiramisu, as if she were talking about someone else. The color drained from Chloe's face. She looked at her mother in disbelief. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm not talking nonsense." Susan raised her voice. "This afternoon, the vintage Patek Philippe your grandfather kept in his study went missing. It was a gift for an old army buddy, a priceless heirloom." She took a breath, then pointed a finger straight at me. "I saw him with my own eyes. This worthless parasite, sneaking into the study. He's the one who stole it." One of Susan's socialite friends immediately chimed in. "Oh my, I'd heard rumors that this son-in-law of yours had sticky fingers, but I never thought he'd be so bold. You can never judge a book by its cover. What a disgrace to the family." In an instant, I was drowning in a sea of accusations and condemnations. I was public enemy number one. Blake stepped forward, playing the part of the reasonable mediator. "Susan, everyone, please, let's not jump to conclusions. Perhaps it's all a misunderstanding. Ethan, did you perhaps just pick it up by mistake? The watch is very important to Mr. Price. If you just give it back now, I'm sure everyone can forgive you." His words were smooth as silk, but every single one of them reinforced the idea that I was the thief. Chloe looked at me, her eyes a storm of disappointment, anger, and deep, profound exhaustion. She must have felt like I had single-handedly dragged the Price family name through the mud. I finally finished the last bite of my cake, wiped my hands with a napkin, and stood up. I looked around the room, at all the sneering faces, at Susan's triumphant smirk, at Blake's mask of false concern. It was all playing out exactly as it did in the book. In the original story, this is where the main character panicked, couldn't defend himself, and was found with this stolen item on his person. He was then disowned by the furious patriarch and thrown out in disgrace. They were all expecting the same outcome for me. They were all waiting to see me nailed to the cross. Chloe closed her eyes, as if she couldn't bear to watch. I smiled. "You're saying I stole the watch?" I asked, my voice quiet, but carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "Who else would it be?" Susan shrieked. "All right," I nodded. "Since you're so sure, how about a little wager?" My calmness threw everyone off. The panic, the tears, the desperate denials they were all expecting. None of it came. I was standing in the eye of the hurricane, yet I was the calmest person in the room, because I knew that the carefully woven net they had laid for me was about to be torn to shreds by my own hands, and there would be no escape for them. A wager. Susan laughed, as if it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "You're a common thief. Why do you have to make a bet with us? Let's bet on whether I stole that watch." My gaze traveled past her and landed squarely on Blake. "If the watch was stolen by me, I'll not only walk away with nothing, I'll let you do whatever you want. Turn me over to the cops. Press charges, I don't care. But if I didn't steal it." Blake met my gaze, a confident smirk playing on his lips. To him, this was just the desperate flailing of a cornered animal. "If you can prove your innocence," he announced grandly, his voice full of self-assurance, "then I, Blake Sterling, will get on my knees and apologize to you in front of everyone here. Deal. That was exactly what I was waiting for. You have my word. Talk is cheap. Why should we believe you? Susan fanned the flames. I think he's just trying to stall. Everyone, don't you think we should search him? Yes, search him. Let's see him try to squirm out of this. The crowd grew restless. No need to search me, I said coolly. Because the watch isn't on me. Ah, of course you'd say that. Susan cackled. Then where is it? Where did you hide it? I didn't hide it. I looked at her, then at Blake, and said slowly, You did. Or rather, the two of you had it hidden in my room. Correct. The smiles on Susan's and Blake's faces faltered for a split second. They never imagined I'd be able to guess their plan so precisely. You're delusional, Susan screamed immediately. Everyone listened to him. He's cornered, and now he's just making wild accusations. Are they wild accusations? Why don't we go up and see? I said calmly. My room hasn't been touched, has it? A flicker of unease crossed Blake's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. He was certain his plan was foolproof. With the help of a maid he'd bribed, the watch was safely hidden under the mattress in my room. All they had to do was search, and I was finished. Fine, since you have the guts to say it, let's all go see. Let everyone see you for the liar and thief you are, Blake declared, projecting an air of absolute confidence. And so, a crowd of Sterling City's elite trooped upstairs toward my room. My room was the smallest, most remote guest room in the estate, dark and cramped. At Susan's signal, a maid walked straight to the bed and lifted the mattress. A gleaming, vintage Patek Philippe watch lay there on the box spring, plain as day. There it is, Susan shrieked, her voice filled with triumphant joy. Caught red-handed. Ethan, what do you have to say for yourself now? Once again, all eyes were on me, sharp as daggers. It's over. The evidence is right there. What a disgrace to the Price family. Chloe swayed on her feet, her face ashen. She looked at me, and all that was left in her eyes was utter despair. Blake walked up to me, looking down his nose, his face a mask of undisguised contempt. You lose, Ethan. Time to honor your side of the bet. In the entire room, I was the only one smiling. Not so fast, I said, slowly pulling out my phone and tapping the screen a few times. The main feature is just about to start. Ladies and gentlemen, who want to see a movie? No one knew what I was talking about. I pressed play, then aimed my phone at a blank section of the wall. I'd anticipated this move and bought a tiny Pico projector online, which I'd already synced with my phone. A beam of light hit the wall, and a clear video began to play. The camera angle was aimed directly at the bed. First, a maid crept into the room, lifted the mattress, and tucked the watch underneath. Then, the video cut to a second figure entering the room. It was Blake. He walked over, checked under the mattress to confirm the watch was there, and a smug, triumphant smile spread across his face. He even made a dismissive gesture to the empty room, his lips clearly forming the word, loser. The video wasn't long, but every frame was like a resounding slap across Blake's and Susan's faces. The room fell deathly silent. Everyone stared, dumbfounded, from the video on the wall to Blake, whose face had gone from red to white to a sickly shade of green. No, that's not real. It's a fake. It's CGI. Blake finally snapped out of his shock, screaming incoherently. A fake. I laughed. Mr. Sterling, I'm just a lowly loser. Where'd I get the skills to fake a video like this? Besides, the timestamp and angle are all crystal clear. We could always send the original file to the police department's forensics lab, if you'd like. Blake began to tremble violently, a cold sweat drenching the back of his expensive suit. He couldn't understand it. How could I have possibly installed a camera in my room? This was completely off script. Susan was frozen, pointing at me with a trembling finger, unable to speak. And Chloe, she stared at the video, then at me. The despair and anger in her eyes slowly faded, replaced by a profound shock and an emotion she couldn't name. She finally understood what I'd meant on the phone that day. She finally understood that the man she had despised for 3 years was not at all who she thought he was. I put my phone away and walked up to the pale, defeated Blake. Mr. Sterling, I said, patting him on the shoulder, my smile feeling demonic. I believe it's your turn to honor the wager. On your knees. Apologize. Blake's legs buckled. The words "on your knees, apologize" were like a mountain crushing him. To kneel before the entire elite of Sterling City, to the one man he despised most in the world, it was worse than death. "Ethan, don't you dare go too far." Susan recovered, rushing to stand in front of Blake. He just made a mistake. You can't humiliate him like this." "Too far," I sneered. "A moment ago, when the two of you were about to send me to prison, you didn't think that was too far? Now that the evidence is out, it's just a mistake? Your hypocrisy is truly impressive, Susan." My gaze swept over the other guests. The way they looked at me had completely changed. Contempt had been replaced by a mixture of awe and fear. "We all heard him. Mr. Sterling gave his word. What does the Sterling family not honor its promises?" That last line put the entire Sterling family's reputation on the line. Blake's face was the color of a ripe plum. He knew that if he knelt today, he would humiliate not just himself, but his entire family. But if he didn't, his reputation as a man who breaks his word would spread through the business world like wildfire. As he stood there, trapped, a deep, authoritative voice boomed from the doorway. "Let him kneel." Everyone turned. Old Man Price was standing there, leaning on a cane, his face dark and stormy. "Grandfather," Chloe whispered. The old man didn't look at her. His sharp eyes were fixed on Blake. "My family may not be royalty, but we will not tolerate vermin scheming under our roof. When you do something wrong, you own it. When you give your word, you keep it." The patriarch had spoken. There was no way out for Blake. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a murderous hatred. Finally, under the watchful eyes of everyone in the room, he bent his knees in humiliation. Thud! He was on the floor, kneeling before me. "I'm saw the..." The two words were squeezed out through clenched teeth. The entire estate was silent. Everyone was stunned by the scene. The golden boy of Sterling City, kneeling at the feet of the city's most notorious loser husband. The image was unforgettable. I looked down at him, feeling nothing. This was just the interest payment. I would make him pay back the principal with dividends. "Get out," I said flatly. "Don't dirty my family's home." Blake snapped his head up, his eyes like poison daggers. He scrambled to his feet and fled the mansion in a daze, the crowd parting before him. Susan tried to slip away too, but I stopped her. "Susan, aren't you forgetting something?" Her body went stiff. "As his accomplice, don't you think you owe your falsely accused son-in-law an apology?" Her face flushed, but under the icy glare of her father-in-law, she finally, reluctantly, forced out a single word through her teeth. "Sorry." "It's all right," I said with a smile. "I hope in the future, you'll be a better judge of character." The farce ended in my complete victory. The gala broke up shortly after. On the way back to the villa, the atmosphere in the car was even stranger than on the way there. Chloe started to speak several times, but always stopped, unsure what to say. An apology? A thank you? A question? Nothing seemed right. She just drove in silence, stealing glances at me from the corner of her eye. She was realizing that she couldn't figure me out at all. Back at the villa, as I was about to head to my room, she finally stopped me. "Tonight. Thank you." Her voice was a little strained. "For what?" I turned around. "For not embarrassing the Price family? Don't worry about it. Until this divorce is final, we're tied together. If I go down, you look bad. I was just protecting my own interests." I framed it as self-interest, not wanting her to think I did it for her. Chloe's lips parted, but she said nothing. The next few days were quiet and peaceful for me. For Chloe, however, they were hell. I knew from the book that Blake, despite his public humiliation, wouldn't just give up. He would pull strings behind the scenes, cutting off the supply of a critical raw material for one of Price Industries' most important projects. Chloe was in charge of that project. If she couldn't deliver on time, it would mean massive financial losses and a devastating blow to her authority within the company. One day, I was sitting out on the patio when Chloe came home, looking utterly exhausted. She made one call after another, her tone shifting from polite to pleading and finally to frustrated sighs. I knew she was scrambling for a new supplier. After her last call ended in failure, she slumped onto the living room sofa and buried her face in her hands. The ever-strong CO looked, for the first time, completely helpless. I watched her, an idea forming in my mind. It was time to give her another little gift. I pulled out my phone and dialed an unfamiliar number I'd memorized from an obscure passage in the novel. "Hello, is this Dave Williams?" A dejected voice answered on the other end. "Yeah. Who is this?" "My name is Ethan," I said, getting straight to the point. "Mr. Williams, I hear you have a supply of high-purity graphene, but your factory's funding has dried up and you're looking to sell it off cheap. Is that right?" The man on the other end was instantly on guard. "Who are you? How do you know that?" I smiled. I knew because the book had mentioned him. Dave Williams was a brilliant but unrecognized inventor. He developed a revolutionary purification technique, but was a terrible businessman, and his company was about to go bankrupt. In the original story, his tech and materials were bought out for pennies by a rival corporation, which then used them to become an industry giant. Now, I was about to hijack that opportunity. "Don't worry about who I am, Mr. Williams. I just want to know one thing. Are your material for sale?" "Yes, of course they are," he said eagerly. "For the right price." "Good." I stood up, my eyes on the woman in the living room who was still stressing over her supply chain, and a smile played on my lips. "Text me your address. Let's talk in person. Chloe, you're about to owe me another one." The next morning, I walked into Chloe's study holding a signed contract. She was buried in paperwork with dark circles under her eyes. She clearly hadn't slept. When she saw me, she barely looked up. "What is it?" she asked coolly. "A delivery for you." I placed the folder on her desk. She glanced at the cover, Exclusive Raw Materials Supply Agreement. Frowning, she picked it up and began to read. When she saw the supplier was a company called Williams Advanced Materials, and the material was the exact high-purity graphene she needed at a price 20% lower than her previous supplier, she froze. Her head snapped up, her usually cold eyes now wide with disbelief. What is this?" Her voice trembled with shock. "Dave Williams. How do you know him?" She and her team had contacted nearly every major supplier in the country. No one had ever heard of Williams Advanced Materials. "It's a small startup on the verge of bankruptcy. Of course you've never heard of it," I said, pulling out the chair across from her and sitting down. "I spent a little time and found him." "You?" Chloe stared at me, then back down at the neatly typed clauses and signatures on the contract, her mind reeling. "Why would you do this?" "Helping you helps me," I said, using the same excuse. "If the project fails, Price Industries' stock tanks, and my reputation as the loser husband gets even worse. I'd rather not add bad luck charm to my resume before we split." The logic was sound, but Chloe knew there was more to it. To find an unknown supplier and negotiate an exclusive contract at such a favorable price in such a short time required an incredible level of business acumen and negotiation skill. This was not something a loser could do. She looked at the man in front of her, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, sitting casually, a faint, unreadable smile on his face. He looked the same as he always had, yet he seemed like a completely different person. The effortless confidence, the sense of being in complete control. It was something she had never seen in him before. "How much did this contract cost?" she asked, her voice unconsciously softening. "Nothing," I said with a shrug. "I cut a deal with Williams. I help him restructure his debt, secure a new line of credit from the bank, and get his company back on its feet. In return, he gives us an exclusive supply of his materials at cost." Chloe was stunned silent again. This wasn't just a simple business deal. This was a high-level corporate maneuver. He had not only solved her immediate crisis, but had also made a savvy venture capital investment on the side. "Where did you get the money?" she blurted out. "My private stash," I lied. In reality, I had used my knowledge of the plot to find a loan officer at a local bank who was desperate to fund a promising small business to meet his quota. I just connected the dots. I hadn't spent a dime. I was just an information broker. Chloe was silent. She realized that her own celebrated business savvy seemed pathetic next to the man she had looked down on for so long. A problem that felt insurmountable to her, he had solved with ease. She looked at him, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Gratitude, curiosity, confusion, and a feeling she wouldn't admit even to herself. "Inadequacy." "Ethan," she said, meeting my eyes, using my name with a seriousness I'd never heard from her before. Who are you really?" "I'm Ethan Vance," I said, standing up to leave. "Just a regular guy who wanted a quiet life. And, for this month at least, your husband." I walked to the door, then paused and looked back at her. The business world is a battlefield, Chloe. You should stop treating your enemies like friends and stop treating your allies like trash. I closed the door behind me, leaving her alone in the study. She sat there, frozen, clutching the contract as if it were burning her hands. Staring at the closed door for the first time, she felt an intense curiosity about the man who had just walked through it. She suddenly realized that in 3 years of marriage, she had never truly known her husband. Or rather, the Ethan she had known had died the moment he tore up that first divorce agreement. This new one was a complete stranger. A stranger who terrified her, but one she couldn't help but want to get closer to. With the supply crisis averted, Chloe's company was back on track. She became even busier than before. And I continued my leisurely, useless life. I'd read in the garden during the day, maybe go for a walk at night. Our interactions returned to near zero. But I could feel something had changed. She started coming home earlier. Sometimes I'd get back from a late walk and find the light in her study on, but she'd be sitting on the living room sofa, staring at a blank TV screen. It was almost as if she was waiting for me. One night, I was out on one of my walks. I passed a bustling block of food trucks, and the smell of grilled meat was too good to resist. I found a taco truck and ordered 2 al pastor, 2 carne asada, and a beer. I hadn't experienced anything this real in a long time. In my past life, back when I was just a regular guy, my favorite thing to do after work was to meet up with friends, grab some cheap food and beer, and just shoot the breeze. The tacos came out, sizzling and delicious, piled high with cilantro and onions. I took a long swig of the ice-cold beer and devoured taco. Just as I was getting into it, a black Bentley glided to a stop by the curb. The luxury car was completely out of place amidst the noisy, cheerful chaos of the food truck park. The door opened, a long leg and tailored trousers emerged, and then I saw Chloe's familiar icy face. She was clearly just coming from work, still dressed in a power suit, a weary look on her face. She stood by her car, staring at me perched on a plastic stool, happily stuffing my face. Her brow was furrowed, her expression unreadable. I was a little stunned myself. What is she doing here? The food truck owner and the other customers all noticed the glamorous newcomer, their heads turning in unison. What are you looking at? Never seen a beautiful woman before. I yelled out to the crowd, then waved at Chloe. Hey, CEO, getting off work? Care for a taco? I expected her to get back in her car and speed away as if I had the plague. But to my surprise, after a moment's hesitation, she closed the car door and walked toward me. She sat down on the plastic stool across from me, her movements stiff and awkward. It was clear she'd never been in a place like this in her life. Hey, one more order, same as mine. I called out to the guy in the truck. I don't eat this, she said coldly, a hint of disgust on her face. Just try it. It's the food of the gods, I said, holding out a freshly made taco to her. I guarantee you'll be hooked. The savory aroma drifted up to her nose. She looked at me, then at the taco, as if she were wrestling with a life-or-death decision. Finally, she took it. Copying me, she cautiously took a small bite. And then, her eyes lit up. See? Not bad, right? I grinned. She didn't say anything, but she silently finished the entire taco. The cook brought over her order. She looked at the plate of steaming tacos and, without any more protest, picked one up and began to eat in small, delicate bites. And so we sat there, me devouring my food, her eating slowly, creating a strange but peaceful scene in the middle of the lively night market. No arguments, no cold shoulders, not even much conversation. But the atmosphere was surprisingly comfortable. Did you come to places like this often? She asked suddenly. Yeah, I said, taking a sip of beer, spinning a half-truth. Before I married into your family, I was just a regular broke guy. The best part of my day was coming here after work, spending $20 to get full and happy. Made all the stress just melt away. I looked at her and smiled. A princess like you wouldn't understand the simple joys of us common folk. She fell silent. She looked at the noisy, vibrant crowd around us, at the genuine ease on my face, and a flicker of something I'd never seen before. Longing appeared in her eyes. She had spent her entire life in a gilded cage. Every move was planned. Everything she had was the best money could buy, but it was all sterile, devoid of this raw energy. Her life was like a glass of purified water, precise but tasteless. And I had crashed into her world like a shot of cheap whiskey, harsh, unexpected, but giving her a taste of something she'd never experienced before. "It's actually kind of nice," she said quietly after a long moment. I blinked, realizing she was talking about this kind of life. I smiled. The Ice Queen was beginning to thaw. That night, we ate a lot of tacos. She even, for the first time ever, drank a whole bottle of beer, a charming blush spreading across her cheeks. She drove on the way back. Soft music played in the car, and the atmosphere was no longer cold and oppressive. "Ethan," she said suddenly, as we neared the villa. "Thank you." "Thanking me again?" I teased. "Is this for the tacos?" "No." She shook her head, her eyes on the road. "Thank you for showing me that life can be like this." I didn't say anything else. I knew something had taken root in her heart. All I had to do was wait for it to bloom. The good times didn't last. Blake's counterattack was coming. After being humiliated so publicly, there was no way his ego would let him just walk away. I knew he'd retaliate, but I didn't expect him to be so reckless. 2 days later, I was heading out to run an errand. As I reached the gate of our neighborhood, a large truck suddenly lost control and swerved directly toward me. It was moving fast, clearly aiming to kill. If I were still the original, weak-bodied Ethan, this would have been the end. But I wasn't. In my previous life, I'd spent years training in MMA and Krav Maga. I wasn't a pro, but my reflexes and conditioning were far better than average. In the split second before impact, I dove and rolled, narrowly avoiding the collision. The truck scraped past me and slammed into the stone wall with a deafening crash. The driver jumped out, saw that I was unharmed, and a look of panic flashed in his eyes before he took off running. I picked myself up, brushed the dirt off my clothes, and stared at the crater in the wall. My expression turned to ice. "You're playing with fire, Blake." I didn't call the police. I knew it would be useless. The driver was a disposable pawn, and the trail would never lead back to Blake. To deal with a coward who attacks from the shadows, you have to drag him out into the light, using his own methods against him. I went back to the villa and pulled up the security footage from the front gate. The camera had a clear shot of the truck's license plate and the driver's face as he fled. I sent a screenshot to a special friend of mine. This friend was a contact I had made based on my knowledge from book. He was the top information broker in Sterling City's underworld. For the right price, he could find out anything. Less than half an hour later, I got a text back. "Got it. Plates are fake. Driver's name is Scorpio, a low-level thug who works for a guy named Viper. My sources say someone paid 20 grand yesterday to have your leg broken." Viper. I knew that name. In the book, he was Blake's personal attack dog, the one who handled his dirty work. "Can you find out where Scorpio and Viper are?" "Easy. They're celebrating at the Eclipse Lounge tonight, VIP room." "Perfect." I texted back, then sent a wire transfer. That night, I changed into a black sweatsuit, put on a baseball cap and a face mask, and went to the Eclipse Lounge alone. The place was a hive of scum and villainy. The deafening music and flashing lights a perfect cover for all kinds of crime. I didn't use the front door. Following the map my friend sent, I went down a back alley, found a drain pipe, and scaled it to the second floor like a spider. The window to the VIP area was cracked open, just enough for me to slip through. I landed silently in an empty room. I could hear loud voices and laughter from the room next door. I pressed my ear to the wall. "Man, that kid is lucky, Viper. I can't believe he walked away from that." It was Scorpio's voice. "Useless piece of shit," a gruff voice growled. "Mister, Sterling paid good money for a broken leg, and all we did was dent his damn wall. How am I supposed to explain this? So, what's the plan now, boss?" "The plan? Mister, Sterling wants him gone. Permanently. Tomorrow, you take a couple of the boys, grab him from his house, and dump him in the river. Make it clean." My blood ran cold. "Dump me in the river? You've really lost it, Blake." I didn't need to hear any more. I pulled out my phone, started a voice recording, walked to the connecting door, and kicked it off its hinges. The men in the next room, Viper, Scorpio, and a few others, jumped in shock. When they saw me, their surprise quickly turned into vicious grins. Well, 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 look what the cat dragged in," Viper sneered, getting to his feet. He was a mountain of a man, with a nasty scar running from his eye to his jaw. "You got a death wish, kid? Coming here all by yourself?" His goons grabbed beer bottles and bar stools, surrounding me menacingly. I'm here to make you a business proposition, I said calmly, making sure my phone was still recording. A proposition? Huh. Viper laughed. Sure. You can propose it to the devil when you see him. Boys, break his legs. The thugs charged at me with a roar. I stood my ground. Just as they were about to reach me, the main door to their suite crashed open. This time, a team of armed police officers swarmed in. Freeze! Police! Viper and his crew stopped dead in their tracks, their faces a picture of utter confusion. They couldn't figure out how the cops had found them. The officer in charge, a sharp-looking woman, saw me and did a double-take. You again? I gave her a small smile. Officer Diaz, good to see you. I was just about to have a friendly chat with these gentlemen, but they seemed a little hostile. By the way, I think I might have recorded something that could be useful for your investigation. I held up my phone. Officer Diaz had been the one investigating Blake's car accident. An anonymous tip from me had helped her crack that case. This time, before I'd even left the house, I'd made another anonymous call about a drug deal going down at the bar. Viper and his crew were quickly subdued. The police found a significant amount of drugs and illegal weapons in the room. As they dragged Viper away, he glared at me, screaming, "You set me up? I'll kill you for this." I walked over to him and whispered, "Don't worry. You won't be lonely for long. Your boss, Mr. Sterling, will be joining you soon." Viper's eyes widened in terror. I ignored him and walked out of the bar with Officer Diaz. "I owe you another one," she said, her eyes full of curiosity. "Ethan, who are you? How do you always know about this stuff?" "Just a concerned citizen," I said with a smile, sending her the audio file. "This is them planning my murder. They also mention a Mr. Sterling. I think you'll know what to do with it." Diaz listened to the recording, and her expression turned grim. "I understand," she nodded. "Don't worry. We'll get to the bottom of this. No one is above the law." I watched the police cars speed away into the night. "Your pawns are off the board, Blake. Now it's your turn. Let's see what you've got left without your attack dogs." I thought that after taking out Viper, Blake would lay low for a while. I underestimated his insanity. 2 days later, Chloe disappeared. Her frantic secretary called me, saying Ms. Price had left for a client meeting in the afternoon and hadn't been seen or heard from since. Her phone was going straight to voicemail. My stomach dropped. A terrible feeling washed over me. I immediately called my underworld contact and started my own search, grabbing my keys and bolting out of the villa. I knew it was Blake. This part was never in the book. In the original story, the useless husband was long gone by this point, kicked out after the disastrous family gala. My presence here had created a ripple effect, a butterfly effect that had spiraled into a hurricane. My constant interference had pushed Blake over the edge. He was no longer thinking rationally. 30 minutes later, my contact texted me. "Got her." The client was a fake, a trap set by Blake Sterling. He took her to an abandoned warehouse district by the docks. A GPS location was attached. I stared at the red dot on my screen, my blood turning to ice. I didn't call the police. I was afraid it would provoke Blake, that he would hurt her. I didn't call her family. They would only panic and make things worse. This time, I was going myself. I flagged down a cab and raced toward the location. The warehouse was in a desolate, forgotten part of the city. A rusted gate blocked the entrance, and an eerie silence hung in the air. I circled around back, found a break in the chain-link fence, and slipped through. The yard was overgrown with weeds, littered with rusting machinery. Drawing on my memory of similar scenes from the book, I moved stealthily, avoiding potential security cameras, and made my way toward the main building. I could hear Blake's crazed laughter echoing from inside. "Chloe, bet you never thought you'd end up like this." I crept to a broken window and peered inside. Chloe was tied to a chair, her mouth covered with duct tape. Her face was calm, but I could see the terror in her eyes. Blake stood before her, clutching a stack of papers, his handsome face twisted into a grotesque, manic sneer. The charming mask was gone. "Sign it," he screamed. "Sign the stock transfer agreement. Price Industries will be mine. And you will be mine. I planned everything. Even if you die here tonight, everyone will think it was a suicide. Driven to despair because the love of your life, was going to marry someone else." Ha ha ha. He was completely unhinged. Chloe stared at him, shaking her head violently. "Not going to sign?" Blake leaned in close, his voice a sinister whisper. That's fine. I have other ways. You've always been so proud, so untouchable. What do you think would happen if I brought in a few homeless guys to keep you company? And what if I filmed it? Do you think your proud father and grandfather would hand over the company to keep the video from leaking? MMPH. Chloe struggled wildly, her eyes filled with pure terror and desperation. You bastard. I couldn't wait any longer. I kicked the rusted metal door off its hinges and stormed in. Blake spun around, startled. When he saw it was me, his shock turned into a cruel, vicious grin. Ethan, you worthless piece of trash. You actually found this place? Perfect. Saves me the trouble of hunting you down. Today, you two lovebirds can die together. He pulled a knife from his belt and lunged at me. I narrowed my eyes, sidestepped his clumsy attack, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. Crack! A sickening snap echoed in the warehouse. Arg! Blake shrieked in agony. The knife clattered to the floor as his wrist bent at an unnatural angle. Whatever self-defense classes he'd taken were useless against someone with real combat training. I didn't hesitate. I brought the edge of my hand down on the side of his neck. He went limp and collapsed to the ground without another sound. I rushed to Chloe's side, tore the tape from her mouth, and untied the ropes. The moment she was free, her strength gave out. She fell into my arms, her body trembling uncontrollably with fear and relief. It's okay. You're safe now, I whispered, holding her and stroking her back. Her skin was cold. It was the first time I'd ever held her, the first time we'd ever been this close. Her tears soaked my shoulder. This strong, untouchable ice queen was now sobbing like a frightened child in my arms. Just then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement. Blake was stirring. With his good hand, he fumbled for the dropped knife. His eyes were filled with pure hatred as he struggled to his feet, gathered all his remaining strength, and lunged, aiming the blade straight at Chloe's back. Look out! There was no time to think. I shoved Chloe out of the way and turned, putting myself between her and the knife. Shunk! The blade sank deep into my back. A blinding pain shot through my entire body. I let out a muffled groan, feeling my strength drain away in an instant. Ethan! Chloe's scream was the last thing I heard before the world went dark. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. The air smelled of antiseptic, and a dull, throbbing pain radiated from my back. I opened my eyes to a plain white ceiling. You're awake. A familiar voice, slightly hoarse, came from my side. I turned my head and saw Chloe sitting in a chair by the bed. She had changed out of her ruined suit into a simple white shirt and jeans. She wore no makeup, and she looked exhausted, but her eyes were fixed on me, filled with a storm of emotions I couldn't begin to name. How long was I out? My voice was a dry rasp. A day and a night. She immediately stood, poured a glass of water, and gently wet my lips with a cotton swab. Her movements were delicate and careful, a stark contrast to the cold CO I thought I knew. Blake, I asked. He's in police custody, she said, her voice steady. Attempted murder, kidnapping, corporate fraud. He won't be getting out. Viper confessed to everything, too. Good, I said, relieved. The main villain of this world was finally dealt with. The room fell silent. She just sat there, watching me, her expression shifting from worry to gratitude, to guilt, and finally settling on a kind of tenderness I had never seen from her before. The doctor said the wound was deep. The knife was only an inch from your heart. If it had been any closer... She trailed off, her eyes welling up. But it wasn't, I said, trying for a light-hearted smile, but the movement sent a jolt of pain through me, and I winced. Don't move, she said, her voice sharp with alarm as she gently pressed my shoulder. Just lie still. She peeled an apple, cut it into small slices, and began feeding them to me, one by one, on a toothpick. I wasn't used to this. Was this the same Chloe who had looked at me with such disgust? For the next week, she never left my side. She canceled all her meetings and took care of me personally, wiping my face, feeding me, and when I developed a fever from an infection, she stayed up all night, constantly dabbing my skin with cool water. Her grandfather and even my mother-in-law came to visit. Old man Price looked at me with deep approval and gratitude. Ethan, he said, patting my hand, the Price family owes you more than we can ever repay. Susan, on the other hand, was a picture of awkward guilt. She stood by my bed for a long time before finally giving me a deep, formal bow. Ethan, I was wrong about you. I was blind. I hope you can forgive me. I just smiled and said nothing. Everything was finally heading in the right direction. A week later, I was well enough to be discharged. Chloe came to pick me up herself. When we got back to the villa, I noticed things were different. My small, dark guest room had been completely redecorated, made bright and spacious. And in the master bedroom, on the side of the bed that had always been empty, a new set of my things was neatly arranged. Was she accepting our marriage? That night, she cooked dinner herself. The food was a disaster. Some dishes were salty, some were burnt. But watching her, flustered and clumsy in an apron, I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest. After dinner, she sat across from me, hesitating for a long time before she finally spoke. Ethan, about what we agreed on, the 1-month arrangement. I know. I cut her off. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a folded document, and placed it on the table. It was a new divorce agreement. Counting the time in the hospital, it's been a month, I said calmly. The color drained from Chloe's face. She stared at the papers on the table as if they were a venomous snake. What? What is this? She whispered, her voice trembling. It's what we agreed on. I smiled faintly and picked up a pen. I said that after 1 month, I would sign a new agreement and walk away with nothing. I'm just keeping my promise. After this, we don't owe each other anything. I lowered my head, preparing to sign my name. I had saved her out of a basic human decency. I had helped her family to protect myself and to fulfill a duty the original Ethan had long forgotten. Now it was over. Blake was gone, the Price family was safe, and it was time for me to make my exit and live my own life. This world, this marriage, it was never mine to begin with. Don't. Just as the tip of my pen touched the paper, a cold hand clamped down on mine. I looked up into Chloe's red-rimmed eyes. The ice, the pride, it was all gone. All that was left was panic and desperation. Ethan, don't sign it. Why not? I asked, playing dumb. She bit her lip, struggling for words. Her eyes, usually so clear and cold, were now shimmering with unshed tears. I waited, giving her the space. This month-long game was finally at its end, and I held all the cards. Because She took a deep breath, as if gathering all the courage in the world, and finally met my gaze. I don't want a divorce. And your reason? I leaned back in my chair, watching her. Forgot how badly you wanted me out of this house, Chloe. Now I'm offering you an easy way out, and you don't want it? That doesn't sound like you. My words were the final needle that popped the balloon of her pride. The tears finally fell, rolling down her perfect cheeks and landing on the divorce agreement, blurring the ink. It was the first time I had ever seen her cry. Yes, I wanted you to leave, she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. I thought you were a useless, pathetic freeloader. I hated you, I looked down on you. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. She reached out with her other hand and gripped my arm tightly, as if she was afraid I would vanish. You're not useless, Ethan. You're smarter, stronger, and better than any man I've ever met. At the gala, when everyone turned against you, you were the only one who stayed calm and turned the tables on Blake. When the company was in trouble and I was helpless, you solved the problem like it was nothing. When I was kidnapped, when I had given up all hope, you showed up like a hero and saved me. You almost died for me. Her words tumbled out, faster and faster, the tears flowing freely now. Ethan, I admit it, I was a blind fool. I never saw the good in you, and I hurt you again and again. But I see it now. I don't want to lose you. You said that after a month, I would be the one begging you not to sign, didn't you? Well, here I am. I'm begging you. She stood up, walked around the table, and stood before me, her voice filled with a raw, desperate plea. I'm begging you, Ethan. Please don't go. Don't leave me. Give me a chance to get to know the real you, to make it up to you, and give yourself a chance to have a real home. She finished, standing there like a defendant awaiting a verdict, her eyes locked on mine. I watched her, this beautiful, proud woman, crying her heart out, and I had to hide a smile. Gotcha. So much for being too good for me. But the show had to end sometime. I sighed, pulled my hand free from her grasp, and picked up the divorce agreement. The light in her eyes died, replaced by utter despair. Then, as she watched, I slowly, deliberately, just as I had a month ago, tore the document into tiny pieces. You. She stared, stunned. Agreement's void, I said, standing up. I reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with my thumb. Because my wife doesn't want a divorce. At the word wife, I saw a blush creep up her neck and flood her ears. She just stared at me, dumbfounded, unable to process the sudden reversal. But, I was just fulfilling my end of the bet, I said, pulling her into my arms. I rested my chin on the top of her head, breathing in the faint scent of her hair. I said that after a month, the decision to sign would be mine. And I've decided not to. She let out a tiny O in my arms, and then it dawned on her. Her small fist began to beat softly against my chest. You jerk. You scare me to death. The blows had no force behind them. It wasn't an attack. It was something else entirely. I just smiled and let her, then wrap my arms tighter around her, holding her close. Okay. I'm sorry, I murmured into her hair. Chloe, the old Ethan is gone. From now on, the man standing in front of you is someone new. Are you ready to be my real wife? She didn't speak. She just burrowed her face into my chest and nodded. Outside, the moonlight was soft and silver. Inside, the light was warm. I knew, in that moment, that I was no longer just a visitor in this story. I had something to fight for, something to protect, and someone I wanted to spend my life with. The month-long war was over. I had won. I'd won an ice queen for a wife and a whole new future.